The Starhaven orbital gleamed against the backdrop of space like a diamond-encrusted ring. Its polished exterior reflected the light of 3 nearby stars, while its interior housed the most important political chamber in this sector of the galaxy, the Interstellar Council Chamber. Here, species from 100 worlds gathered to debate, negotiate, and occasionally manipulate their way through the complex dance of cosmic politics. Jake Martinez stood at the entrance to the chamber, trying not to fidget with his tie. He'd bought the suit off the rack from a discount store back on Earth, convincing himself that aliens wouldn't know the difference between designer fashion and bargain bin attire. Now, surrounded by beings draped in shimmering fabrics that seemed to defy the laws of physics, he was reconsidering that assessment. "Earth Ambassador Martinez," announced a melodic voice from an unseen speaker. "The Council will receive you now." Jake straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. The massive doors slid open with a whisper, revealing the Council chamber in all its glory. The circular room rose at least 30 meters high, with curved walls dotted with hovering platforms, where delegates from various species observed the proceedings. At the center was a round table with 12 seats, each occupied by a representative of the founding species of the Alliance. As Jake approached, he cataloged the aliens with a mixture of awe and trepidation. To his right, a being composed entirely of swirling gases, contained within a transparent, geometrically complex vessel. To his left, a crystalline entity whose facets glittered with internal light patterns that seemed to be a language unto themselves. Directly across from his assigned position sat what appeared to be a sentient colony of tentacles, arranged in a vaguely humanoid shape, adorned with what might have been ceremonial jewelry or possibly vital technological components. Jake couldn't tell which. At the head of the table was the Council President, a reptilian being with scales that shifted colors subtly as they moved. Their vertical pupils narrowed slightly as Jake took his seat. "Ambassador Martinez," the reptilian said, voice surprisingly warm despite the cold-blooded appearance. "We welcome Earth to these proceedings. It is unusual for a species so young to petition for council membership." Jake smiled, hoping it translated across species. "Earth appreciates the opportunity. President Zathal, we believe we have much to offer the galactic community, despite our relative youth." A polite murmur rippled through the chamber. Jake could sense the condescension beneath the courteous tones. These beings had been traveling between stars when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Some had probably been observing Earth since the dinosaurs. Yet, here he was, representing humanity in its first real interstellar diplomatic mission. "Before formal proceedings begin," Zathal continued, "it is customary for a preliminary assessment to be conducted. This ensures all parties are approaching negotiations with transparency." Jake nodded, though he felt his stomach tighten. The briefing materials had mentioned something about this, though details had been frustratingly vague. Of course, Earth has nothing to hide. "Excellent!" Zathal gestured to a figure seated in shadow to the right of the main table. "Vexthera will conduct the assessment." The figure rose and stepped into the light. Jake fought to keep his expression neutral as he took in the sight of the alien approaching him. Vexthera stood nearly 2 meters tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with a subtle iridescence. 4 arms emerged from a torso that tapered to a narrow waist, and below that, something like legs, though they moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost aquatic. Her face, if it could be called that, featured 3 large, almond-shaped eyes, arranged in a triangle, no visible nose, and a small mouth that didn't move when she spoke. "Ambassador," her voice sounded directly in Jake's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "I am Vexthera, Chief Cognitive Assessor for the Council. My species, the Mendari, possess telepathic abilities that serve the Council in matters requiring absolute certainty of intention Jake swallowed hard, but maintained his diplomatic smile. I understand. What does the assessment involve? A simple procedure. Vexthera's mental voice was smooth, professional. I will establish a shallow connection to your surface thoughts. This allows me to verify your diplomatic credentials and ensure no deception is present. The process is quick, and for most species, entirely painless. The chamber had gone quiet. Jake was aware of every alien eye, sensory appendage, and cognitive receptor focused on him. This was clearly a test, not just of him, but of humanity's readiness to join galactic civilization. I consent, Jake said, straightening in his chair. Vexthera stepped closer, her movement so graceful she seemed to float across the floor. She positioned herself behind Jake's chair and placed one of her 4 hands lightly on his shoulder. Relax your mind, Ambassador. This will take but a moment. Jake tried to focus on the diplomatic mission, on Earth's interests, on presenting humanity in the best possible light. But as he felt a gentle pressure against his consciousness, his thoughts scattered like startled birds. Suddenly, he was thinking about the air conditioning in the chamber. Was it too cold? His breakfast that morning, those rehydrated eggs, had been a mistake. His tie, was it crooked? It felt crooked. Should he adjust it now, or would that seem nervous? Wait, did he lock his quarters before leaving? Did he remember to send that birthday message to his nephew? Was that meeting with the Centaurian delegation tomorrow or the day after? While these thoughts ricocheted around Jake's mind, externally, he maintained perfect composure. I hope the assessment won't take too long, he said pleasantly to the council. I'm quite eager to discuss Earth's application in detail. Behind him, Vexthera's 3 eyes widened slightly. Most species she had mind-touched before had organized thoughts, linear, structured, with clear hierarchies of priority. But this human's mind, it was like stepping into a room where a dozen conversations were happening simultaneously. None of them related, yet all somehow being processed by the same consciousness. She pushed deeper, looking for the human's true intentions regarding the council. Instead, she found Jake mentally reliving an experience from 3 years ago, the assembly of a piece of furniture from a company called IKEA. The memory came complete with sensory details, the smell of cardboard and pine, the feel of the Allen wrench in his hand, the mounting frustration as parts labeled B6 refused to connect with slots labeled A4, despite the diagram clearly showing they should fit together. Simultaneously, Jake was conducting a complex moral inventory of his last conversation with his mother, calculating whether his failure to call on a holiday called Mother's Day constituted a serious ethical lapse or merely a venial sin of forgetfulness. This thought stream branched into 3 separate guilt scenarios, each with its own emotional weight and philosophical implications. And running parallel to both these thought streams was yet another, a detailed alternative history of Jake's own life, in which he had chosen to pursue a career as a marine biologist rather than a diplomat. This hypothetical Jake was, at this moment, discovering a new species of deep-sea vent-dwelling crustacean, which real Jake was visualizing in remarkable detail, despite having no formal training in marine biology. Vexthera's grip on Jake's shoulder tightened involuntarily. And of course, Earth's agricultural techniques might be primitive by galactic standards, Jake was saying smoothly to the council, utterly unaware of the telepathic turmoil behind him. But we've developed unique approaches to sustainable farming that might be applicable to terraforming projects. Is something wrong? Assessor Vexthera asked the crystalline being, whose name was Tulkshin. Their facets flickered with patterns that indicated concern. No. Vexthera's mental voice now broadcast to the entire chamber, though it contained an unfamiliar tremor. The assessment continues. She had never encountered a mind like this before. The human wasn't blocking her. Quite the opposite. His thoughts were completely open, But they were so numerous, so fragmented, and yet so simultaneously present, that following any single thread was like trying to isolate one specific drop of water in a turbulent ocean. She pushed deeper still, determined to complete her assignment. Now she was drowning in Jake's memories of something called high school prom, which somehow connected to anxieties about his receding hairline, which linked to budget calculations for his apartment back on Earth, which spiraled into a detailed internal debate about whether hot dogs could be classified as sandwiches, which led to a philosophical inquiry into the nature of categories themselves. And still, Jake spoke calmly about Earth's diplomatic goals, utterly unaware of the chaos he was unleashing on Vexthera's structured telepathic mind. The primary reason Earth seeks Council membership is, of course, access to the Technological Exchange Program. While we understand there are standard progression paths for developing species, we believe we can contribute unique perspectives, even as we learn from your advanced civilizations. The gas cloud entity, designated Ambassador Zerm, emitted a series of modulated frequencies that translated as a question. What specific technologies does Earth hope to acquire through membership? Jake smiled professionally. Medical advancements are our highest priority, followed by sustainable energy solutions. Earth is committed to ethical technological development, and we... Behind him, Vexthera's third eye began to twitch. She had encountered resistance before, mental blocks, cultural barriers, even hostile psychic countermeasures. But this was something else entirely. The human's mind wasn't fighting her. It was overwhelming her through sheer chaotic volume. She tried to isolate a single thought thread. Are hot dog sandwiches? It seemed simple enough. A clear question with finite parameters for debate. But as she focused on it, the thought expanded explosively. The human was simultaneously considering the bread-based definition of sandwiches, requiring two separate pieces of bread, evaluating the structural integrity argument, one piece of bread partially split but connected, contemplating historical precedents. Were open-faced sandwiches truly sandwiches? Imagining a Supreme Court case on the matter. Visualizing a hot dog in extreme detail, complete with mustard, relish, and onions. Remembering a disappointing hot dog he'd eaten at a sporting event 6 years ago. Wondering if the aliens at this very table ate food remotely similar to hot dogs. Questioning whether he was hungry right now, or just thinking about food out of nervousness. Calculating how many hot dogs he could afford to buy with his diplomatic stipend. Worrying that thinking about hot dogs during such an important meeting made him a bad representative for Earth. And all of this was happening not in sequence, but simultaneously, with each thread maintaining its integrity, while somehow interacting with all the others. Vexthera's careful mental discipline began to crack. Her species communicated telepathically among themselves, but they did so with structured, orderly thoughts, one at a time, carefully controlled. Nothing in her training had prepared her for this mental maelstrom. The worst part was that she couldn't disengage. Something about the human's thought pattern had created a feedback loop. The more she tried to make sense of his mind, the more her own thoughts began to fracture, mirroring the chaos she was observing. In the physical world, Jake continued his diplomatic address, unaware of the telepathic crisis unfolding behind him. Earth's art and cultural repositories might be of interest as well. Humans have created extensive fictional narratives across multiple media that Vexthera's control finally shattered. The telepathic connection, meant to be a narrow, controlled link between her mind and Jake's, suddenly expanded into a full broadcast. Every being in the council chamber, with even the slightest telepathic sensitivity, was instantaneously bombarded with the entirety of Jake Martinez's unfiltered thought processes. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The crystalline delegate, Tilk Sin, emitted a high-pitched tone of distress as their facets froze in a pattern that their species associated with cognitive overload. The gas cloud entity's containment vessel began to vibrate dangerously as the consciousness within it tried to process the simultaneous consideration of hot dog taxonomy, IKEA furniture assembly, and existential guilt. The tentacled being's appendages writhed in patterns that translated to extreme confusion in their gestural language. 3 smaller alien observers on the floating platforms above actually fled the chamber, their sensory organs overwhelmed. Council President Zathal's scales flashed rapidly through colors that hadn't been seen in the chamber before, the reptilian equivalent of a stunned expression. And in the center of it all stood Vexthera, all 4 arms now rigid, 3 eyes wide open, but seeing nothing, as the full complexity of human consciousness flooded through her and into the chamber. Jake, still oblivious to the chaos he had inadvertently caused, paused in his presentation. "Is everything all right?" he asked, noticing for the first time the strange reactions around the room. That simple question, which spawned no fewer than 14 simultaneous thought processes about diplomatic protocol, alien body language, cultural faux pas, and self-doubt, was the final straw. Vexthera let out a telepathic scream that reverberated through the minds of everyone present. Her physical body went rigid, then collapsed to the floor behind Jake's chair. The chamber erupted into pandemonium. Medical personnel rushed in. Delegates backed away from the human as if he were radioactive. Emergency containment protocols activated, sealing the chamber. "What happened?" Jake asked, rising from his chair in alarm. "Is she okay? Did I do something wrong?" Zathal, the only council member who had maintained some composure, approached Jake cautiously. The reptilian scales had settled into a pale yellow, a color Jake couldn't interpret. "Ambassador Martinez," Zathal said, voice carefully controlled. "It appears there has been a miscalculation regarding human cognitive patterns." Jake looked from the unconscious Vexthera to the chaos around the room. "I don't understand. All she did was touch my shoulder. I didn't feel anything." "That," said Zathal, "may be precisely the issue." The reptilian made a gesture, and an aide rushed forward with a document on a crystalline tablet. "The Council has made a decision regarding Earth's petition." "Already?" Jake was confused. "But we haven't even presented our full case." "No further presentation is necessary," Zathal said quickly. "Earth's application for Council membership is hereby approved, effective immediately, with all rights and privileges thereto." "It is?" Jake couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. The mission briefing had suggested this process would take weeks of negotiation, possibly months. "That's wonderful news. Earth will be honored to—" Yes, Zathal interrupted, pressing the tablet into Jake's hands. "Simply place your thumb here to accept on behalf of your planet. The detailed terms will be transmitted to your vessel." Still confused, but not wanting to question this unexpected diplomatic victory, Jake pressed his thumb to the indicated spot. The tablet flashed green in acknowledgement. "Excellent," Zathal said, backing away slightly. "Earth is now a full council member. This session is adjourned, urgently, for medical reasons." Before Jake could respond, the chamber was already clearing. Vexthera had been placed on a hovering medical platform and was being rushed from the room, surrounded by concerned attendants. The other council members were departing with what seemed like unusual haste, some casting wary glances back at Jake. Within minutes, Jake found himself alone in the massive chamber, holding the membership tablet and wondering what exactly had just happened. The journey back to his quarters was equally strange. Aliens that had barely acknowledged his existence that morning now flattened themselves against walls as he passed. One particularly small, tentacled being actually fled into a maintenance shaft at the sight of him. In his quarters, Jake placed the tablet on his desk and loosened his tie with a sigh of relief. Whatever had happened in that chamber, the mission was a success. Earth was now a council member, with all the benefits that entailed. His career was made. He should celebrate. Maybe order something exotic from the station's food synthesis system. First, though, he needed to file his expense report and check if his room's climate control could be adjusted. It seemed chilly. And call his mother. And figure out what to pack for the return journey. And double-check the time of tomorrow's follow-up meeting. And 57 simultaneous thoughts later. Jake Martinez settled in for a quiet evening, blissfully unaware that he had just fundamentally altered humanity's place in the galaxy. 2 levels below, in the medical bay of the Starhaven orbital, Vexthera was undergoing emergency cognitive restructuring. 3 specialists surrounded her unconscious form, their own telepathic abilities working in careful, coordinated patterns to undo the damage caused by exposure to Jake Martinez's mind. "How is she responding?" asked Zathal, who had come directly from the council chamber. The lead medical officer, a Mindari like Vexthera, but with specialized training in psychic trauma, shook their head. "We've stabilized her, but the cognitive patterns are resistant to normal treatment. It's as if her mind has been temporarily rewired to mimic the human's thought structure. Will there be permanent damage? Unlikely. But she'll need at least a full cycle of rest and rehabilitation before she can resume duties." The medical officer hesitated. "President Zathal, I've reviewed the telemetry from Vexthera's connection to the human. I've never seen anything like it." "Explain," demanded Zathal. "Most sentient species we've encountered have evolved with linear or branching thought patterns. Some, like the hive-connected Vrex, have distributed consciousness, but even they maintain cognitive structure." The officer displayed a holographic representation of neural patterns. "The human's mind doesn't just think multiple thoughts simultaneously. It thinks in contradictory directions at once, maintains emotional states that should be mutually exclusive, and somehow functions despite what our models would classify as severe cognitive dissonance." Zathal's scales shifted to a deep blue, a sign of concern among their species. "Are you suggesting the humans are some form of higher intelligence we've failed to recognize?" "Not higher," corrected the medical officer. "Different. Chaotic in ways our ordered minds struggle to comprehend. It's as if their entire species evolved without the mental filters the rest of us take for granted." The implications were disturbing. The council had admitted humans to membership not out of recognition of their worthiness, but out of sheer psychic shock. What would happen when humans began attending regular council sessions? When they started participating in telepathic information exchanges? When they began integrating into the wider galactic society that relied so heavily on ordered thought? Issue an immediate classification, Zathal decided. Human minds are to be designated a Class 7 cognitive hazard. No telepathic species is to attempt contact without specialized training and protective measures. "Already done," confirmed the medical officer. "Though I'm not sure it will be sufficient. We've never encountered a Class 7 before." Zathal turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. What was the human thinking about that caused Vexthera such distress? Some complex philosophical problem? A sophisticated deception? A hidden psychic weapon?" The medical officer checked the records. "Something called a hot dog, and whether it constitutes a sandwich." Zathal stared for a long moment, scales cycling through colors too quickly to interpret. Then, without another word, they left the medical bay and headed for the strongest drink available on the station. Jake woke the next morning to a notification on his communication device. His scheduled meetings had been canceled. His departure from the station had been moved up. A faster ship was being prepared to take him back to Earth immediately. Most surprisingly, a substantial diplomatic gift package was being loaded aboard for Earth's scientific community, including technological specifications that had been on humanity's wish list for decades. "Huh," Jake mumbled, still half asleep. "I guess they really liked my presentation." He dressed quickly, packed his meager belongings, and headed for the docking bay. Along the way, He noticed the same strange behavior from the station's aliens. They gave him an unusually wide berth, some making what he assumed were protective gestures as he passed. At the docking bay, a small delegation waited. Council President Zathal was there, scales a carefully maintained neutral gray, along with two security officers who seemed unnecessarily tense. "Ambassador Martinez," Zathal said formally. "On behalf of the Council, I present these gifts to Earth as a token of our new alliance." They gestured to a row of sealed containers being loaded onto the ship. "Earth thanks you," Jake replied, falling back on diplomatic protocol. "This is unexpected but greatly appreciated." "Yes. Well," Zathal seemed eager to conclude the formalities. "We have also taken the liberty of preparing detailed guidelines for future human representatives to the Council. It contains important safety protocols." Jake accepted another tablet. "Safety protocols?" "Indeed. Most crucial among them. No telepathic contact between humans and other species without proper containment measures." Jake blinked. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. What happened yesterday with Vexthera? Is she all right?" Zathal's scales flickered briefly to a deep purple before returning to gray. "Assessor Vexthera experienced a cognitive overload when attempting to process human thought patterns. She will recover, but the incident has been most informative about the unique nature of human consciousness." "Unique?" Jake was growing more confused. "In what way?" Zathal seemed to struggle for the right words. "Your species' ability to maintain multiple conflicting thought processes simultaneously, without experiencing system failure, is unprecedented. It suggests evolutionary paths we had not considered possible." "Wait," Jake said slowly. "Are you saying that humans think differently than other species?" "Differently is a significant understatement. Ambassador Martinez. The closest analogy in terms you might understand. Most sapient minds are like a single, powerful processing unit, while human minds appear to be chaotic parallel networks with minimal central oversight." Jake wasn't sure if he should be offended or proud. "And this is why the Council approved our membership so quickly? Because we think chaotically?" Zathal's scales betrayed a flash of what might have been embarrassment. "The Council recognizes unique value when it encounters it. Your species, cognitive diversity, will bring new perspectives to our deliberations." After a pause, they added, "From a safe distance, using appropriate interfaces." A notification sounded, indicating the ship was ready for departure. "I should go," Jake said, still processing this strange turn of events. "Indeed." Zathal extended a formal gesture of farewell, careful not to make physical contact. Earth's official Council representative should arrive within one standard cycle. Please ensure they are thoroughly briefed on the protocols. "Of course," Jake nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what protocols Zathal was referring to. As he boarded the ship, Jake's mind was already splitting into multiple tracks, wondering what Earth scientists would make of the alien technology, worrying about his mission report, planning his next career move, questioning whether he had packed his favorite socks, calculating the time difference between the station and Earth, replaying the strange events of the Council meeting, contemplating whether he could expense the comfort upgrade on the journey home, and still, somehow, debating whether a hot dog was truly a sandwich. Behind him, the station's security forces visibly relaxed as the airlock sealed. During the journey home, Jake reviewed the safety protocols Zathal had provided. They were extensive and, to his mind, baffling. Humans were to be seated at least 3 meters from any telepathic species during Council sessions. Direct mental contact was forbidden without specialized equipment and trained intermediaries. Human quarters within Council spaces were to be lined with psychic dampening materials. Most strangely, there was an entire section devoted to cognitive containment techniques for discussions about Earth foods, furniture assembly, and something called existential time management anxiety. None of it made sense to Jake. He'd just sat there while Vexthera had apparently had some kind of episode. He hadn't done anything, hadn't even felt anything. The ship's AI announced they were approaching Earth, and Jake put aside the protocols to stare out the viewport as his home planet came into view. Beautiful, blue, seemingly ordinary, yet apparently housing a species with minds so chaotic they were considered a cognitive hazard by the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. He'd have to include that in his report, though he wasn't entirely sure how to phrase it. Earth's application for council membership has been approved on the basis that our brains are so disorganized they crash alien telepaths. Didn't sound appropriately diplomatic. The ship docked at Earth's orbital station, where Jake was surprised to find a high-level reception committee waiting. There was the Secretary General of the United Nations, the Director of the Interstellar Relations Bureau, and a cluster of scientific advisors all looking expectantly at him. "Ambassador Martinez," the Secretary General greeted him warmly. "Congratulations on your extraordinary success. We received the Council's transmission, full membership, technology exchanges, preferred trading status. You've achieved in one meeting what we projected would take years of negotiation." Jake smiled weakly. "Thank you, Madam Secretary General. It was an unusual meeting. We're particularly interested in this designation they've given humanity," said one of the scientific advisors, a neurologist according to her identification badge. "A Class 7 cognitive hazard. It sounds alarming, but the Council seems to consider it valuable." "They were definitely alarmed," Jake confirmed. "Apparently our minds are chaotic in ways that overwhelm their telepath." The neurologist's eyes lit up with scientific curiosity. "Fascinating. We've long theorized that human multitasking and our capacity for cognitive dissonance might appear strange to differently evolved intelligences, but to have it confirmed, and so dramatically, we'll need to study the implications immediately." The Interstellar Relations Director stepped forward. "The Council has requested we send a permanent representative within the month. They've specified extensive protocols for human-alien interaction, particularly regarding telepathic species." "I've reviewed them," Jake said. "They don't make much sense to me, but I'm not an expert on xenopsychology." "Few are," the neurologist noted. "But we'll need to become experts quickly. This could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself." The debriefing continued for hours. Jake explained everything he could remember about the incident with Vexthera, the Council's reactions, and the strange behavior of the station's inhabitants afterward. Scientific and diplomatic experts dissected every detail, speculating on implications and opportunities. By the time Jake finally made it to his apartment on Earth, he was exhausted. He collapsed onto his couch, loosened his tie, and stared at the ceiling. Humanity had just secured its place among the stars, because their minds were apparently so chaotic they qualified as psychic weapons. It wasn't how anyone had expected first contact protocols to unfold, but it had worked. Jake's thoughts drifted to Vexthera, wondering how the alien telepath was recovering. He felt a twinge of guilt, though he hadn't intentionally done anything to harm her. Maybe he should send a message. But what would he say? "Sorry, my brain broke your brain?" That hardly seemed appropriate diplomatic language. His apartment's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming message. It was from the Interstellar Relations Bureau, a formal offer to become Earth's permanent representative to the Council, with a substantial increase in salary and benefits. Jake stared at the offer, thoughts fragmenting in typical human fashion. Part of him was calculating the financial advantages. Another part was anticipating the prestige. A third segment worried about the pressure of the position. Yet another wondered if he had enough dress shirts for a permanent posting. One particularly anxious fragment was already planning how to sublet his apartment, while a contradictory thread suggested he might want to keep it as a home base. His practical side was reviewing the alien technology gifts and what they might mean for human advancement. while his social mind contemplated how his family would react to the news. All these thoughts and more coexisted, overlapped, contradicted, and somehow integrated into a functional consciousness that allowed Jake to reach for a drink, sigh deeply, and begin composing a response accepting the position. In that moment, completely unaware, Jake Martinez embodied exactly the chaotic cognitive gift that had simultaneously terrified and impressed the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. 6 weeks later, Vexthera had recovered enough to return to limited duties. Her first assignment was to brief a team of Mendari specialists who would be working with the permanent human delegation to the Council. "The most important thing to understand," she told the nervous group, "is that humans do not experience their cognitive chaos as chaos. To them, it is simply consciousness." One of the trainees raised a hand. "Is it true their minds process dozens of unrelated thoughts simultaneously?" "Dozens would be a conservative estimate," Vexthera confirmed. "And many of these thoughts directly contradict each other, yet somehow coexist without causing the human distress." "How is that evolutionarily possible?" asked another trainee. "Wouldn't such cognitive dissonance prevent effective decision-making?" Vexthera had spent much of her recovery contemplating this very question. "Our current theory is that it's not despite the chaos that humans have advanced, but because of it. Their cognitive pattern allows them to consider multiple possibilities simultaneously, to hold contradictory ideas long enough to find unexpected connections, to worry about both the cosmic and the trivial in the same moment." She activated a holographic display showing Jake Martinez's neural patterns compared to those of other species. "Where we see disorder, they find creativity. Where we experience system failure, they find innovation." She paused, then added with a touch of reluctant admiration, "The universe may be more chaotic than orderly at its foundation. If so, human minds may be better aligned with cosmic reality than our own structured consciousness." The trainees looked suitably unsettled by this philosophical bombshell. "Your containment suits have been specially designed to filter human thought patterns," Vexthera continued, indicating the equipment being distributed. "Even so, limit initial contact to no more than 5 minutes. If you begin experiencing thought fragmentation, disengage immediately." One of the trainees, younger and bolder than the others, asked the question they were all thinking. "Assessor Vexthera, you experienced unfiltered human consciousness. What was it like?" Vexthera was silent for a long moment. How could she explain the unexplainable? The sensation of thoughts multiplying endlessly, of emotions tangled with logical processes, of memories intertwining with speculation, of the profound nestled comfortably beside the absurd. "It was," she finally said, "like drowning in an ocean that contained everything at once, terrifying and wondrous in equal measure." After another pause, she added, "And they live with this every moment of their lives, never knowing anything different." As the training session concluded, Vexthera received a notification that the new human delegation had arrived at the station. Earth's permanent representative, not Jake Martinez, but someone named Dr. Eliza Chen, was scheduled to present credentials to the Council the following day. Vexthera would not be conducting the assessment this time. Instead, she had been appointed to a newly created position, Head of Human Cognitive Interface. Her job would be to develop safe, effective ways for telepathic species to communicate with humans without experiencing the psychic equivalent of a system crash. It was both a demotion and a promotion, a fascinating contradictory outcome that felt strangely appropriate given the subject matter. As she prepared the specialized chamber for tomorrow's meeting, Vexthera found herself wondering if humans realized what a profound impact they would have on galactic civilization. Their chaotic minds, previously dismissed as primitive by advanced telepathic species, were about to introduce an entirely new way of thinking to the cosmic community. And somewhere, on a planet called Earth, Jake Martinez was packing for his return to the stars, his thoughts bouncing between diplomatic protocols, expense reports, whether he'd remembered to cancel his apartment's utility services, if hot dogs were sandwiches, and a dozen other unrelated concerns, all while being blissfully unaware that his ordinary human mind was about to change the galaxy forever. In the vastness of space, civilizations that had evolved toward perfect order were about to encounter perfect chaos, and nothing would be quite the same again.